Great Depression Documentary by Abby Greskovic, Leia Parry, Meghan, Marion, and Victoria Cole. Beginning in the 1920s, America began becoming much more urban than rural. People began moving from farms to cities in hope of new jobs and factories. In New York, there were more than 5 million people, and in Chicago, there were 3 million. Farmers started to struggle post-World War. Over 6 million people moved to urban areas. After the tumults of World War I, Americans were looking for a little fun. Women were independent and achieving greater freedoms. For instance, women were granted the right to vote, more employment, and more freedom towards the automobile. Flappers were young, emancipated women who embraced the new fashions and urban attitudes. Many women also entered the workforce as nurses, teachers, and librarians.
Prohibition began in the 1920s and ended in 1933 when it was repealed by the 21st Amendment. Prohibition was passed in the 18th Amendment. Prohibition made it illegal to make, sell, or transport liquor. Prohibition failed because it found ways around the law, established organized crime, speakeasies, illegal bars, and bootleggers. Prohibition agents known as G-men stopped smugglers and speakeasies. Prohibition was repealed because it was undermining respect for the law. Many Americans did not believe drinking was a sin. Most immigrant groups were not willing to give up drinking. To obtain liquor, drinkers went underground saloons known as speakeasies. People also bought liquor from bootleggers who smuggled it from Canada and Cuba.
Charles Darwin's theory of evolution claimed life had developed from simpler forms. In 1925 of March, Tennessee passed the nation's first law that made it a crime to teach evolution in schools. John Scopes was accused of teaching evolution in his high school class and was fined with $100. The Harlem Renaissance, beginning in 1919 to 1929, was a gathering of black artists and black musicians, celebrated heritage and protested prejudice and racism. The best-known poet of the Harlem Renaissance was Langston Hughes. He protested racism and acts of violence.
The 1929 stock market crash is well known as the most devastating crash in United States history. It didn't happen on a single day. The stock market continued to plummet over the course of a few days, setting in motion one of the most devastating periods in the history of the United States, the Great Depression. Black Thursday. The most significant event started on Black Thursday, which is October 24th, 1929. On that day, nearly 13 million shares of stock were traded. It was a record number of stock trades for the U.S. It marked the end of an upward trend on stock prices. On Black Thursday, the stock prices dropped so quickly the stock ticker could not keep up. As the day progressed, the stock ticker lagged behind, failing to show the most up-to-date stock prices.
In those last days of Black Tuesday, the stock market traded 6 days a week. The banker's move led to a slight increase in stock price on Saturday, October 26th. Over the weekend, many investors lost faith in the stocks and decided to sell their shares. When the markets reopened on Monday, October 28, 1929, another record number of stocks were traded. The stock market declined more than 22%. The situation worsened yet again in the infamous Black Tuesday, October 29, 1929, first day of Great Depression. When more than 16 million stocks were traded, the stock market untimely lost $14 billion that day.
Causes of the Great Depression. First thing, rising stock markets. The sudden appearance of overnight multimillionaires convinced many that the stock market was the easiest way to get rich quick. The second thing, margin loans, refers to the practice of using borrowed money to pay for stocks in order to pay for much more stocks than one could normally afford. 3. Overproduction. In order to assure buyers that they would not be left without items to buy, manufacturers produced at top capacity. 4. Agricultural depression. All through the 1920s, while those in the East Coast and Wall Street prospered, the American farm family suffered. Fifth thing, European depression. In the 1920s, Europe's source of several of our most important trading partners was in the depression of its own. This had the effect of leaving little left over to trade with the United States. In 1931, the Dust Bowl began. Texas to the Dakotas suffered a severe drought. One region was especially hit hard. High winds carried soil away in dust storms. It buried houses, fences, and trees. It was because of dried-out soil and years of overgrazing by cattle and plowing destroyed grasses. Okies were farmers who packed their belongings into cars and headed west. They became known as migrant workers. Once they reached West Coast, they were unwanted, and sometimes angry crowds blocked the way, sending migrants away. The ground that covered the soil in place was gone. The plains winds whipped across the fields, raising billowing clouds of dust to the skies. In some places, the dust would drift like snow, covering farmsteads. When Franklin D. Roosevelt was brought into office for presidency, he decided to start the New Deal, the 100 days. FDR had sought advice from college professors who were experts on economic issues. He decided his first challenge was to save the crumbling banking system. He declared a bank holiday. He closed every bank for 4 days and asked Congress to pass the Emergency Banking Relief Act, where only banks with enough money to meet their depositors could reopen. He began fireside chats, which was when he would speak from a chair in the White House and bring everyone's confidence back up. He decided to lay out the New Deal, relief for the jobless, plans for economic recovery, and reforms to prevent another depression.
The Great Depression was the worst economic crisis in the U.S. history. From 1931 to 1940, unemployment was always in double digits. In April 1939, almost 10 years after the crisis began, more than 1 in 5 Americans still could not find work. On the surface, World War II seems to mark the end of the Great Depression.